It's my pleasure to welcome to the truth today, Ann Vandersteel. She has her own podcast. It's called Steel News. We had her business partner on a few months ago in a great conversation. We've got a lot to talk about. Let's start with your work on trying to eliminate child trafficking. It's a topic that we've come to talk about a fair amount on the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And before we started recording, I mentioned that it feels to me like the subject is just right below the surface. I can't figure out why one of the most horrible crimes against humanity that we could envision is not front and center on every newspaper, on 60 Minutes and 2020. Why are people not talking about it?
You know, that's a great question. I think everybody's looking for the answer to that. But it comes down to this, John. If I told you we had 500,000 American citizens trapped as hostages in Afghanistan, would you not expect our U.S. military to be there yesterday to free them?
100%.
Well, today we have 500,000 children being held hostage by a system that goes under the moniker Child Protection Services. But at the very end of it, when you look at what really happens and where the money goes, it is anything about but protecting children. It's all about how we can monetize the children like cattle or chattel and move them through a system so that the parasitic organizations that are living off the federal funds, and it's a lot of money, can expand their organizations and just work the children through the system to basically drain as much money as possible for their own personal profit. It's a really sick system. This doesn't mean we are anti child protection of children that are truly being trafficked or abused or raped or what have you. We're about pro-constitution, pro-family, and how we can encourage families if they are under distress to get the help they need. But why should the state be the place they turn? It's never worked out in the past. Government never does anything right. They're supposed to be limited. And this is just such an overreach of parental rights, due process, and of course, the child. This is about the child. This is our future, John. And we're wagering it on an agency that is fully funded by the Social Security Administration to the tune of $80+ billion a year. It's serious.
Well, connect the dots. How does this happen? Now, you're not talking about children who are in broken homes with no parent that end up under child protective services. It sounds like you're talking about something that's more sinister than that.
Well, no, it comes from all sides. I mean, so let's start with the pipeline. This all originates when a phone call comes in or a report is filed, whether it's a mandatory reporter as a teacher. Teachers are considered mandatory reporters, pediatricians and doctors, firemen, police, et cetera. These are all mandatory reporters. And it's hearsay. There has never really been a definition of what is an exigent circumstance in which to remove a child without even, true hardcore evidence. The problem we see today is you have teachers who see little Johnny come in with a bruise on his arm. And Johnny said, "Oh, yeah, I fell out of a tree." And the teacher decides, well, maybe the parents shouldn't have let Johnny climb the tree. And they're making that judgment call. As a parent, I can tell you my kids have done a lot of things that I didn't see them do. And they come back with a skinned knee. This is called being a parent and a child. This is just what happens. It's
my
life.
wife and I used to laugh about the fact that we were sure we were on somebody's list because we raised 3 boys and they're all boys.
Yeah.
And they had bicycles, skateboards, roller skates, roller blades. We had a tree house. We had a rope swing. And if they weren't in Piedmont emergency room, one of their friends was.
That's right. That's right. And that's normal. This is called normal parenting.
But what you're describing sounds like you're
overreach.
You're alleging that it's guilty until you prove your innocence.
Correct.
And they strip the child from the home.
They strip the child from the home. They strip the family from their parental rights. They strip you from your constitutionally protection, such as a speedy trial, a fair trial, your ability to bring in your exculpatory evidence and otherwise, perhaps a jury of your peers. When you walk into a family court after CPS has knocked on your door, you are guilty until proven innocent, number one. Number two, it is a star chamber. It's the judge, it's the court-appointed attorneys, and it's you, and it's any other, quote, expert witness that they have on a revolving paycheck door. And so you literally walk in and you're the most hated person in the room. That's how it stacks up and that's how it goes down. And unfortunately, it's really hard to find family courts where the deck is not stacked, where you get a fair shake, where they will listen to you and take your explanation at face value. Because once that report is filed, that is what the judge makes their decisions based off of. They don't really care what the parent has to say in most circumstances. And so the statistics will show you that 95% of the children trapped in this system do not meet a legal threshold to be removed from a home. So if you talk about 500,000 children, 500,000, and 95% of them don't qualify, and you talk about $81 billion a year coming out of the federal government dispersed into these other 3 and 4 letter agencies under the Child Protective Services moniker, that money, if you can reduce the intake of children, that money should also similarly be reduced by the same amount. The problem with the federal government is once they've allocated money, they don't want to stop the money. So you need to find another place more meaningful which to redirect those funds.
Well, and we know that during the Biden days, 400,000 children came across our southern border that were unaccounted for. Kash Patel now says that they've identified and been able to save 150,000.
Right.
But that still leaves a pretty hefty number of children that are somewhere in our 48 states that we can't find, and we don't know what kind of circumstances they're living under. We suspect that they're pretty horrendous.
So I'm going to share something with you that's going to be rather shocking. In 2019, and I was up close and personal because I worked along the border with an incredible war correspondent, Michael Yon, during 2022, 2023. We were up and down the Texas border. We were in the Darien Gap for months at a time.
My gosh.
Covering in the jungles, all the people coming through the Darien Gap. And it was thousands and thousands and thousands of bad people. Prisons that were being let out in Venezuela and other countries. They were coming through. I have videos to prove it. So what I can tell you with the missing children is that, Tara Rodas, God bless her, she was an incredible lady that worked for Department of Home, HHS and DHS. And she was at the Pomona Valley Intake Center where a lot of these children were dumped. And many of them just disappeared once they were removed and placed with sponsors. And many of the sponsors, we went and looked at some of the properties where these sponsors supposedly were located. It was one apartment for maybe one person to live in, and 20 children were at this one address, which they weren't there at all. The most frightening thing about this whole scenario is a lot of those children that came across the border were placed into the foster care system, and they've lost track of those children as well. That's pretty terrible. But the point that's going to really drive this home is that every year the State Department puts out a report called the Trafficking in Persons Report. It's a worldwide global look at human trafficking. In 2019, when Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State, his Trafficking in Person report under the United States column identified as the foster care systems as the #1 place where predators went to go find children for trafficking.
What a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame when you're talking about 500,000 kids trapped in a system. And in one state in particular, where a head on a bed, a child's head in a foster home bed is $65,000 a year, and they move that child 20 times in a year.
Do you think it's all about money?
Well, that child turned into a $1.2 million revenue stream as opposed to just $65,000 by moving him 20 times in a year. So you tell me, is that for the best interest of the child to keep moving him from foster home to foster home? Or would it be better to have found out, did that child have an alternative parent or an alternative grandparent or aunt or uncle, what have you? Was there something in the community that would have been better for the child to go to? I compared this to North Carolina, where families lost their children because they lost their homes and had to pay a mortgage on a piece of dirt and couldn't afford another rental home. So instead of the state offering $3,500 for a rental house for the family of 4, they said, we're going to take your children and we'll be happy to fund a foster home, $16,000 a month for your 2 kids. I mean, the economy of scale makes no sense. They could have really done the family a much better service to keep them together, put them in a rental, even if they had to relocate them to another state, but at least help them afford that while they're still having to fund a mortgage for something that doesn't have a structure on it. So the rationale, the reasoning for what goes on can only come down to money.
How do we combat it?
Well, several ways. We wrote a book on it, and we're educating people called CPS Pipeline, State-Sanctioned Kidnapping. We explain the system. We also have a bonus chapter that tells you how you can effectively prevent your kids from getting trapped in it. We have done a lot of media. Thank you for this. But also we've written legislation. And the legislation that we have put together really addresses at the beginning of the chokehold of the pipeline, when they go and take these kids on hearsay, you can't do that anymore with our legislation. And we've got some buy-in from some of the folks in Florida in the state legislature, in addition to Paul Renner, who's running for governor, who wants to see this system fixed. I've heard other candidates feel similarly inclined to want to fix this system. But when you can slow down the intake because you now define what is an exigent circumstance to remove a child, that should be the most I mean, when you stop and think the state stepping in to remove a child, it had better be a really horrific reason why they have to do
Why
this.
don't we pass a parent bill of rights?
Well, that's a great question. And I can tell you this much, Paul Renner is talking about parental bill of rights, internet bill of rights for children that are exposed to things more dangerous than your child at a county park at midnight with what you see online. So these are the types of things the state needs to be more reticent of and really lean into the 9th and the 10th Amendment and your constitutional protected rights so that the state is not interfering.
Well, let me just say how much I appreciate the work that you are doing on this.
Thank you.
As we talked before we started our interview, the crimes against children to me is the worst thing that someone can do to another human being.
Agree.
And it is, I mean, I think it should be punishable by death. I've said
So
that
does
on
Paul
this,
Renner.
I've said this on this program for 4 years.
Good.
And I really hope that the American people will stand up and say, this is not permissible on our watch. Well, if we haven't bummed our audience out enough already, we got a whole lot more to talk about. Grade Donald Trump for me.
At this point, I'm going to give him a C+.
A C+.
Yeah.
Wow, I would have been a whole letter higher.
Okay.
But tell me what, well, let's do the old Ben Franklin. What do you like that he has done? What do you think he should get high marks for?
Well, I think he's doing a great job of still being the cheerleader in chief. He's trying to keep the morale and the spirits up in America because Americans are really challenged with, the price of the pump, the price of the store. Inflation is still out of control. I don't care what Washington, D.C. agencies pump out in terms of numbers. I live an everyday normal life and I see it myself and I talk to my friends and it doesn't matter if they're very wealthy or they're average Americans. People still feel it. They see it.
Yes.
They're paying attention to it. But you when you're trying to transition, and it looks like what President Trump is trying to do is trying to transition into a new system. I may not necessarily agree with the new system that he's transitioning to, trying to make us the Bitcoin capital, because I'm a sound money person. I believe in constitutional money. Gold and silver is the only legal tender. And if we don't have something being backed by that, it's still fiat to me. So call it Bitcoin, call it whatever. With the Genius and the Clarity Acts, you are looking at track and trace, the IRS, and still agency interference. And nowhere in our Constitution did the founders really conceive of agency government, U.S. code superseding and smothering the rights of the people that live in a constitutional republic. And that agency and code belongs in D.C., and that applies to them, rules for them, not for us. And so I don't see the differentiation. I'm disappointed that we haven't had the Department of Education dissolved. That was one of the first things I heard him tell Linda McMahon, do a good job, you'll be out of a job. And I was expecting to see that. They got refunded. They've thrown more money at the foster care problem. That isn't the answer. We need to return that into the states and more importantly, into the families and into the local community. And it can be done. There's organizations that are working on that. Engaging in another war is a sort of a punch in the gut. And the fact that we haven't seen mass deportations, that's another big thing. And I've heard from various people in ICE that work in there and worked in there that, it came from the top that they had to slow down the number of mass deportations because it wasn't going to play well for the midterms.
Well, I mean, I think that's a political reality. And there's some things that you and I may disagree on a little bit. Deportation is one of them. I think the notion that we're going to deport 18 million people is a fallacy. It's just never going to happen. The interesting thing is the American people voted for Donald Trump because he was going to close the border and send them all home.
Right.
And then we started sending them all home and they said, oh, I didn't know it was going to be this messy. And we see people getting killed in the streets.
Yeah.
I think deservedly. Yeah. I mean, the lady in Minneapolis who tried to run over the cop, I'm sorry. There's certain things you just don't do. You don't stick your finger in a light socket and you don't try and run over a cop with your car.
I agree with you 100%.
And if you do, you're going to get spanked.
I agree with you.
I feel bad for the lady. I think it was an impulsive decision, but it really kind of turned the stomachs of the American people.
Yeah.
And now we've seen that played out 3 or 4 more times. And so I have authored a little immodestly, the Gordon solution for sensible deportation.
Oh, I want to hear it.
Well, I just think that, the American industry depend on illegals. It's just a reality. The hospitality industry, construction.
Agriculture.
I'm sorry? Agriculture is maybe the biggest.
Yeah.
If you pull all those people out of our country at once, which is impossible, but just say for the sake of argument that we're going to do that, those industries would collapse.
That's true.
So there's a political reality that exists alongside of this. So what I have advocated is that we turn all the COVID, we reopen. Stick with me before you throw something at me.
No, I'm not going to throw anything.
We reopen the COVID vaccination centers, but we rebrand them guest welcoming center.
Okay.
And so you got 90 days, maybe 6 months, if you're illegal, to go there and register.
Okay.
And when you register, we're going to vet you both here and in your country of origin. And if you are not a rapist, robber, murderer, or something horrible, that you haven't done something bad to some other person, and you are employed and you've got an employer who will vouch for you, and you've otherwise contributed to our society, we're going to give you a Trump Gold visitor's card. And that will allow you to stay here for some indeterminate period of time. The policymakers will have to work out what that time period is. And you will also get a Social Security card, and you will sign a contract that you will not vote, nor will you receive our social services. And under those circumstances, we'll allow you to stay. Now, if you don't register and you get caught for jaywalking,
out
straight to CCOT.
Okay.
No questions asked, no due process. Save it for somebody else. And if you're a bad guy, you get deported immediately.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm 100% in agreement with your way you're doing it. I hadn't thought of using these COVID centers as a way to sort of kettle the fish in. I like that. I think it's an efficient solution. And I fully agree. I think what Trump is doing, and they've tried to do, is really get the worst of the worst out.
Yes, and I'm fully in support of
100%.
that. I'm in support of sending everybody home that's illegal. It's just, I'm in support of a lot of things that just aren't ever going to happen.
Right.
Because it's fantasy world, and this falls into that category. So I think the Gordon plan would actually flip the whole conversation on the Dems, because Trump would be the good guy.
He would be the good guy.
Deportation sets Trump up to be the bad guy.
Right.
So anyway,
I agree with you, but I will take it one step further, and I will say one of the areas I would really like him to spend some more time on, and I think Tulsi did a fabulous job, is literally doing what JFK tried to do: scatter the intelligence community into a million pieces.
100%.
And we are being manipulated. Our media, the psychological operations. It is a real information war out there, and it's hard to hear the signal through the noise.
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning, and you're ripping off the Band-Aid.
Yeah.
That is what I spend my time thinking about, speaking about, reading about. I think the deep state has got a stranglehold on this country.
100%.
And the reason that I think that they do is not because they're so powerful, although they think they're smarter than everybody else and that they're somehow should be making the right decisions for the American people. They've proven themselves to be incapable of doing that time and time again. But when you don't agree with them, they just kill you.
That's right.
And that's significant power. And we can
Chuck Schumer warned us.
Well, he did indeed. 6 ways to Sunday.
That's right.
That they can get you, but they got JFK.
Yeah.
There's zero doubt in my mind that they killed our 35th president.
Correct.
And they've gotten away with it.
Yeah, they have. And they will continue to to throw that weight around and remind us that they can get away with it. But at some point we have to, this is what I would like President Trump. I would like him to be fully transparent and say, you know what, here's the deal. My family's threatened. I'm threatened. You've seen them take a few shots at me already. You know that they'd like to kill me. I need your help. I need America to fully comprehend what has happened, because his last address he just made regarding the election theft of 2020 is frankly information that I was breaking news on as I sat in the hotel room at Trump Hotel in DC in December of 2020 with Sidney Powell and Patrick Byrne. Nothing was new that
I have
was
a lot of
presented.
friends who were in that room with you.
Oh, really?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Preston Halliburton from Atlanta.
Okay.
And obviously Mayor Giuliani.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
yeah. So this is not what I'm saying is we're not getting new information. And the reason we're not is because the intelligence community is still very much in control. And
Project Mockingbird.
Exactly.
It hadn't gone away.
It hasn't gone away. It hasn't gone away. Now, podcasts like this are fabulous. Being able to do this sort of independent media is absolutely necessary. The problem is you're seeing a lot of the big pharma, military, and intelligence complex models coming into the podcast arena. I'm going to give you some news here. I was talking with somebody on the way down. There's a company called the Wellness Company, TWC.
Sure. We've had Peter McCullough. Is that Peter McCullough?
Peter McCullough, yeah.
On our show.
His business partners were business partners of Dr. Zelenko, who I run the foundation for, the Zelenko Freedom Foundation.
Oh, wow.
And Zev was a phenomenal man. He passed away, sadly, but his business partners have not both. One has a lot to answer for because it has come out very clear in a most recent lawsuit against Foster Colson, the CEO of the wellness company, that they liquidated Dr. Zelenko's company in order to start up the wellness company after Dr. Zelenko passed away. There's also allegations in the lawsuit that Foster Colson, created another parallel trust, revocable trust, to mirror the one that Zev had set up, and the insurance money was supposed to be redirected into this other new trust. So there's a lot of impropriety. There's a lot of concerns. There's a lot of concerns around that family that I'm being made apprised of now that have been reported on by others. But it's concerning because the community, the employees that Foster had around him were all former military intelligence folks. They've employed the big pharma model with the advertising, and they've offered a lot of money to people, same way that Pfizer did. And they sort of co-opted a lot of podcasters and made them very dependent on the revenue stream. And then they stopped one day when they got all the way up to Fox News. And it's the same sort of get people all fired up, speak in your language, and then pull out and leave you with nothing. And it's a very effective model. But if you don't know that you're in it, you are become a victim to it. And I hate to say it, but it's Peter McCullough knows all about this. I made him very aware of everything, and he chose to continue down the path. And now there's a big lawsuit, and it's not going to do well for Peter or the people at the wellness company.
So what about Bongino? Is he your neighbor?
He's not my neighbor.
You're in that part of the country.
I am, but he's probably about a half an hour away from me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed. I thought that he was going to go to Washington and help give us the transparency that he promised, that we were anxious to get. And then he makes an announcement that what he's seen has shocked him to his core, and he'll never be the same person again. It wasn't too many months later that he resigned from the FBI. Do you have a
he blocked
of
me.
What happened?
He blocked me on X, so I don't really see his stuff anymore. Dan, I guess.
What did you do to make him mad?
Well, I think I was echoing what people were saying. Dan, why did you quit? Why aren't you telling us what you saw? I mean, if this is what you're going to do, I understand he was under NDAs, but he attacked a lot of people that were concerned about what the president was doing with respect to the Epstein files. Mm-hmm. Let's rewind the tape. We weren't talking about the Epstein files in 2024. President Trump came to the Oval Office during the campaign trail. He was talking about biometrics at the border. I am vehemently opposed to AI and hyperscale data centers being used to track and trace me, which is what they're going to do with.
Well, I think I've got bad news for you.
It's here.
They're already tracing you.
Of course they are.
All these cameras at intersections. Yeah. I mean, that's federally paid for by the federal government.
Absolutely. By us.
And, I don't use cash anymore. I like to use cash, but I keep losing it. So I rely on my debit card. Yeah. And so everything I buy, they know that I had soup at Houston's this morning or this afternoon for lunch.
So I look at these things, and, the Epstein files was basically given to us by Pam Bondi. We weren't even talking about it. And next thing you know, we're salivating at the mouth. Well, yes, we've been talking about Epstein for 10 years. So let's get to the bottom of it. And the next thing you know, we're being told to sit down and be quiet, and, that old news, and that we're panicans. And we were basically ridiculed, not only by the president, but by anybody around him who was told to parrot the narrative. And that, to me, when Dan Bongino sat there and told us we got to look into the Epstein files during his podcast, when he had a big show, was most disappointing. It started out as a head scratch, and then it just became insulting. And he insulted millions of Americans that were like, wait a minute, your administration brought it up. We jumped in. They released half the files. They're not releasing the rest of the files. We don't know why. But
I think we do.
I think we do too.
I have my suspicions. I don't
What's yours?
know. Well, I don't think there's any question that Epstein was intelligence.
Of course.
Acosta told us that he was, because he was before the Senate in a confirmation hearing, and they asked him point blank, why'd you go easy on Epstein? And he said, because I was told to.
Right.
I was told he was intel. And
what do we know about him now? He was also part of getting the financing together for Bitcoin.
Oh.
That was in the files as well.
That I did not know.
Yeah, he's part of the Bitcoin money that brought it back together when they were really struggling, when they were first getting Bitcoin off the ground. So when I'm concerned, and many others are, and I always was, and when I heard that, it confirmed that Bitcoin is another intelligence apparatus. Just like the CIA used poppy and drugs around Contra to fund our illicit operations.
Nobody denies that.
Bitcoin's the same thing. The same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah, sad.
Maybe I'll sell my Bitcoin. I don't have much, not enough to worry about. All right, so I'm going to give you a list of things. Okay. You tell me which were not orchestrated by the CIA and Intel.
Okay.
JFK, RFK, MLK, Building 7, Epstein, Butler, Charlie Kirk.
Well, none of the above were, I mean, all of them were involved in the intelligence community apparatus. Charlie Kirk, as to all the partners of the intelligence community, hasn't been fully made present yet.
I agree.
But I think there's some foreign influence definitely in there.
But here's the thing: if you say it was Mossad, and I the fact is, I don't know.
I don't either.
The only thing I do know intellectually, I'm 100% sure it was not Tyler Robinson.
No.
And if he was involved, he was a bit player. He was Lee Harvey Oswald.
Correct. He was the patsy.
Of the patsy.
He is the patsy. Yeah.
And so who did kill Charlie? I don't know. I like yourself, I do a lot of podcasts and I'm invited on and television and radio. And I was asked, who did I think killed Charlie Kirk? And I said, I don't know. My suspicion, my suspects are the CIA, Mossad, Turning Point USA.
And wasn't that sad?
Yes.
That part's heartbreaking to say.
Well, I've known a lot of people in that organization, and every single one of them just doesn't seem right to me.
Well,
it's hard to put my finger on it, but they're not genuine, and they're.
Do you know Major General Paul Vallely?
I do not.
He is part of their advisory board, and he wrote a book called Mind Wars with a well-known Satanist, Michael Aquino, who is now deceased, but he's a Satanist, and the two of them wrote a book on basically psychological operations, Mind Wars. It's called Mind Wars. And he was sitting on the advisory board for Turning Point USA, which I happen to know General Paul Vallely quite well and used to consider him a friend until I recognized that I was being leveraged in a psychological operation to try and get to somebody else. I won't detail that now, but off camera, I'll tell you about it. It was really interesting. And so I'm pretty horrified at when I look at the government as a whole, and I look at the construct of the corporation and how it is weaponized. It is pretty evil what is going on. These public-private partnerships are all about taking control and weaponizing agencies against we the people. Loper Bright was overturned. We don't have Chevron deference overturned. And yet what's changed? They're still judge, jury, and executioner. Nothing has changed with agency power. Nothing, including we still have Department of Education. So, when I look at as the government as a whole, we are not a constitutional republic. We don't operate as one. We have it there underneath it all, but we're not operating as one. And so the intelligence community is absolutely behind all of this, and they are funded by the international banking community, which goes back to 1080.
Yeah.
It goes back a long time. The Rothschilds and all the banking community and Federal Reserve, it's all controlled. That was how they controlled Europe, and then they brought it here.
We'll get right back to the show after this brief word from our sponsor, Masculine Man Essentials. Look, most deodorants on the shelf are full of aluminum, parabens, and synthetic junk. Masculine Man Essentials goes at it differently. All natural ingredients, built for men, and it actually holds up through the whole day long. Whether you're at the office, at the gym, in traffic, or just getting home for the night, try Masculine Man Essentials. I've been using it, and I can tell you, it's the real deal. Head to masculinemanessentials.com, grab yourself a 2-pack or a 4-pack, use the promo code TRUTH at the checkout to save on your first order, and the link is in today's show notes. As you know, we don't put our name on anything that we haven't tried and believe in. So when I tell you about Nessa's Hemp, I want you to listen up. Nessa's Hemp is a Chicago-based company that makes hemp, and it was founded by Anessa. And what she's built is really something. We're talking about clean, high-quality hemp products with no gimmicks, just real ingredients, real transparency, with real results. Whether you're dealing with stress, sleep issues, inflammation, or you just want to add something natural to your wellness routine, Nessa's Hemp has something to offer you. Head over to nessahemp.com, that's NESAS hemp.com, and check out what they've got. Use our promo code TRUTH for a discount just by being our listener. So is we the people and the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, just a fantasy? Are we living in some sort of an alternate reality that people don't know or don't.
They wave the Constitution around like it means something. It's just really more of a punchline at the cocktail party, and we don't operate using it at all. It's as evidence our earlier discussion. Family courts are not constitutional at all. It's a star chamber. You walk in there, you're the guilty victim, and everybody hates you. And they're going to find a way to drag you and your kids through a system for a minimum of 15 months because that's about what they can do to squeeze every dime out of the system. And unfortunately, this is the situation of America. Now, do I have hope? I always have hope in the American people because I think that I especially, believe it or not, Gen Z, shockingly enough, Gen Z is now savvy enough to know they grew up with a cell phone that mom and dad are tracking them. How many kids do I see in my neighborhood that I hadn't seen for 5 years? Outside, no cell phones, fishing, riding their bikes. Even if it's an electric bike, they're out doing stuff, sometimes mischievous, but they're outside again. I hadn't seen that for 5 or 6 years. And I think they're doing it because they can ditch the cell phone, lose mom and dad for a while, and just be kids. And that to me is encouraging because that's a sign that they recognize we are a surveillance state right now. And I think Gen Z, oddly enough, I've talked to a lot of kids lately, the mid-20s, they're like, yeah, this country is not, we'll never get the picket fence, the house, the dog, the happy home with mom staying
That's
home.
so sad.
They see it.
I
They
mean,
know it.
I loved being a kid.
Me too.
And I loved being a kid in America.
Me too.
It was Ed Sullivan, the wonderful, wonderful world of Disney,
Yeah.
Dennis the Menace, and Lassie.
That's
I mean,
right.
wow, how much better can it get?
It was, you couldn't make it better. It was beautiful.
And we've lost it.
And we've lost
We
it.
have absolutely lost it. But I do agree with you. I think the younger generation, the best source of optimism that I see is that they're flooding back to the church.
They are.
Yeah,
They are. And I want to thank Charlie Kirk for that.
I do too.
Charlie Kirk was a big, huge reason for that. And sadly, I didn't follow him the last sort of year and a half of his life. And apparently he did have a revelation. He woke up. I saw him kind of going down the establishment trail. And I went, oh, darn it. Because I used to interview him early on when his career first started in 2017, 2018. But to see him wake up the youth and boy, what a command of the Bible that young man had. Just beyond impressive.
Unbelievable. I knew Charlie reasonably well.
Did you?
We weren't best friends. We weren't on speed dial, but I had his cell. He had mine. He came on our show 6 months before he died. We had a great conversation. And I would see him about twice a year, mostly serendipitously. I mean, I bumped into him in Aspen one time and we went and had dinner together.
That's great.
And he was the smartest human being I've ever met.
100%.
He could quote he could tell you the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the House, and the president of the Senate in every of the 50 states.
Mm-hmm.
He knew politics inside and out. And like you said, he could quote the Bible better than my own minister could.
100%.
And I mean, he was a brilliant human being. And I was sitting in Norman, Oklahoma, having lunch with my wife and our middle son. We were having just a wonderful lunch on a beautiful fall day, and up on the screen in the restaurant flashed that Charlie Kirk had been shot. I felt like somebody had punched me in my stomach.
I recall.
And I looked at my wife and I said, why would they take Charlie Kirk? And she said very simply, he was making a difference.
He was.
What a travesty.
Yeah.
What
He was
How
making
sad.
a difference, John. He would have been president one day. I have no doubt he would have
I
been.
asked him right here in the Palm Beach Republican Party Club one night. I said, you should be on the ticket with Trump. He said, well, there's a problem with that. And I said, what? He said, well, I'm only 30 years old. You got to be 35.
That's right. That's right.
Ticket to be president.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any question that he would have been a national political leader had he
He already
lived.
was.
Yeah.
He already was. And, it's interesting when he started speaking out and saying, hey, I don't think we should have foreign interference. We shouldn't, he was trying to really make America about America. And I don't want to single out countries because it's not about that, but he recognized there was issues going on. And it's not about the people of countries. It's about governments trying to be in control. But it's not even the government. It comes back to the intelligence and the banking community that control these governments all over the place. And
so what camp are you in between Tucker Carlson and President Trump vis-a-vis Israel?
I see it through the same lens as Tucker does.
Me too.
Yeah, I see it through the same lens. That doesn't mean that the Israeli people, the true biblical Hebrews, are bad people. But I think the government is diabolical.
Do you know any Persians? Do you know people
I
from
absolutely
Iran?
do. I know Persians.
Are they not the sweetest, smartest, nicest, hardest working people you know?
One of my oldest and dearest friends escaped when the Shah of Iran was overthrown in 1979, came to the States, and she's still a dear friend of mine today.
Yeah. One of my good friends in Atlanta, Ditto. But you could just go through all the countries of the world. And I worked in the inner city in Atlanta. I
Oh,
started a charity in 2006
right.
after the Atlanta police beat down the door of a 92-year-old and shot and killed her, and then planted marijuana in her basement and tried to pin it on her grandson, saying he was dealing out of the house. And the fact of the matter is that story lasted about 5 minutes because he was
Yeah.
a straight A student and an Eagle Scout,
Yeah.
never smoked weed, let alone dealt it. And they just got the wrong address, and through shoddy laziness, and 6 Atlanta cops went to prison. And
Good.
it gripped me, and I reached out to the pastor of the largest church in the neighborhood, and I called him like 6 times, and he finally answered, and he said, "Yeah, what do you want?" And I said, "I just want to tell you how sorry I am for what has happened in your community. And the fact that you're not hearing from others don't mean that we're not all grieving with you."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, that is the nicest call I think I've ever gotten. And I said, "Well, that's it. I just wanted to say that." And so we're hanging up the phone. He said, "Hey, would you want to have coffee?" I said, "Sure, I want to have coffee." And we met for breakfast. And to this day, we're lifelong friends. Reverend Anthony Motley. He's been on our show a number of times.
Oh, that's wonderful.
He's a
John.
wonderful human being and one of the most pragmatic people I know. And I call him my spiritual leader. And we could talk about so much about that. But the point I was going to make is that we were welcomed with arms open wide by everybody in that community except the leadership.
Isn't that telling?
And the late Ivory Young, who I became very good friends with, was the city councilman. One of the state representatives, Mabel Thomas, I have no hesitancy calling her out, made our lives miserable. And I asked Ivory one day, I said, "Ivory, why are we being mistreated by these people?" And he said, "Oh, John, you don't know?" I said, "No." He said, "They're the poverty pimps. You're threatening their power
That's
and
right.
their economic structure."
Mm-hmm.
And so shortly thereafter, I was having a bad day, and I called Reverend Motley and I said, "Rev, the Bible says that God made man in his image." He said, "That's right, John." And he gave me the chapter and verse and read it. I said, "Well, then that just leaves me with one question. What is the matter with God?" And he said, "Oh, no, John." He knew exactly where I was going. I was
Mm-hmm.
being flippant. And he said, "It's not God. It's that little brother of his." And it
Yeah.
was the first time in my life that I consciously came to grips with the fact that there is true evil in this world.
That's it.
And we see it all around us. I used to just give people kind of forgiveness and a free pass that, well, they just grew up in a different household than I did.
Right.
They just got a bad card in life. So we shouldn't condemn them. We shouldn't give them a free pass, but we should try and help them in some way. And then that conversation awakened me to the fact that there's just sheer evil,
That's it.
and it's got to be eradicated.
I agree with you 100%. And I think if more people just had common sense conversations, similar to what you just experienced with your pastor over that horrific incident,
Yeah.
I think the world, I mean, the law and there's the law and then there's legal, and they're not the same things. And I think we need to get back to very serious basics. We've made everything far too complicated, and all the virtue signaling and again, going back to the intelligence community, all of this stuff where we've injected racism and on and on and on. I don't look at America as a racist country. And I know a lot of people that aren't the same color as me that feel the same way. When we
100%.
see
That's
this-
the point I was making
Yeah,
about English Avenue. I
exactly.
walked down the street in the worst neighborhood in America.
Right.
I was never fearful.
Correct.
I may be stupid, but I just wasn't fearful
Yeah.
because people were so genuinely kind to me.
Right.
And I was like, "You're black. I'm white. Why are you being nice to me?" And
Because we're told that they're not supposed to be.
that's it.
Yeah.
And it's the leadership that have to continue to drive a wedge in this country between races.
That's
and
right.
it's just so fundamentally wrong.
Oh,
And Charlie Kirk and I talked about it. It was the last conversation that he and I had
wow.
on this show. And I said, "Charlie, don't you think all these ists are just one great manipulation to keep us divided and pull us apart and to silence us, frankly?"
Sure.
And he said, 100%. And he and I made a deal. We weren't going to be silenced by sexist, racist, nationalist, misogynist. I don't know what some of those terms even mean. It's just, I'm over it. I'm just going to tell you what I believe is true.
They have pushed transgender and the DEI wokeness on all of us because they need another wedge to divide
I
us.
think it is nothing more than a manipulation to get us
100%.
fighting with each other.
That's totally what it is.
Because it's so nonsensical.
It is.
Who can believe? I mean, I watched this woman who is a medical MD getting appointed to some office in the federal government that required a confirmation, and she would not say that men could not have babies.
I know. I recall.
What
That's
the
insane.
hell is the matter with
I don't know.
her?
I'd like for her to show me how they can. If you can make that happen and we can get a video of that, I'd really like to see how that happens.
You know, it was a political statement.
Of course it was.
It wasn't a scientific statement.
No.
And I think it was, who was it? Tom Cotton, or not Tom Cotton, his lookalike from Missouri.
Oh, Josh Hawley.
Josh Hawley.
Yeah, Josh Hawley.
Was putting her in a corner.
Yeah.
He could not get her
I know.
to acknowledge the fact that men can't.
But these, I mean, again, these all come down to, these are pomp and circumstance, dog and pony shows that sit up on Capitol Hill. And it makes us feel like, yeah, we just punched him in the face.
It's so disillusional.
But nothing changes. Nothing happens.
I had dinner with Jim Jordan a year ago.
Yeah.
And I said, you're the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. The one person in America who could deliver a subpoena to Ray Epps.
That's right.
And Michael Byrd.
Where is it?
And bring them before your committee and put them under oath and to have them bring their bank accounts with them.
Yeah.
That's all we need to know to unravel January the 6th.
That's right.
Why haven't we done it?
Great question. It's the question of, I mean, look, John Solomon is reporting constantly, the fire hose is coming out about all the election integrity stuff. That's great. But what are we going to do about it? Because we've released all this information before.
It's just pageantry.
It's pageantry. It's
and
pageantry.
It just grates on my nerves so bad.
Absolutely does.
And Jim Jordan, there were, I don't know, 15 or 20 people there. And he said, oh, I've issued more subpoenas than anybody in the federal government ever. And I was like, okay, answer my question. Ray Epps, Michael Byrd, bank accounts, and put them before your committee. And then he just went on another tangent. It's just maddening.
Because that's
I like Jim Jordan.
It's accountability you're asking for.
Exactly.
And I think that's not in their job description, apparently, because somebody's big fat check wallet book said, no, you can't talk about that.
I think the thing that bothers me the most is that there are people in this world in positions of leadership and power that are willing to incarcerate 800 people, calling it an insurrection when the doors were open. Officers invited them in.
That's right.
Most of them didn't harm or touch anything. Like this kid, Brandon Fallows, he was 19. He walked into the Capitol through open doors, went into the hall of the hall of statuaries, and gave himself a self-guided tour, spoke to no one, touched nothing, left, and the next thing you know, he was in prison for 3 years.
Right.
So part of the time in solitary confinement because he had the audacity to send a paper out that reported on what the prison was like and the inhumane conditions that he was suffering under.
You know, from where I was sitting, there was far more than 800 people that went in that building that day. How come?
3,000, I think, is the number.
How come not all 3,000 were arrested?
Why weren't you arrested?
Great question. I'd have to ask the partner I was in that went in the building and shot video. Why didn't she get arrested? Why didn't she get put on a Quad S list?
Because it was theater. It was a narrative to take our mind off the 2020 election, which for 2.5 years I worked on in Georgia. I don't require any convincing that Georgia was stolen. And President Trump last week told us it was stolen.
Right.
And that it was a conspiracy. We're conspiratorialists, because there was a conspiracy
right,
involving China and our own CIA.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
I am really sick of it.
So what are we going to do about it? President Xi is coming to see the president. Are we going to go to war with China? Is this episode we have over in Iran going to escalate because China is helping Iran with weapons? I mean, how many weapons depots have we claimed that we've destroyed, including the nuclear facilities, et cetera? Yet we're still concerned about nuclear facilities. I mean, the information that's coming out, is it bad intelligence coming to President Trump? And so he's saying things that are just not true because he doesn't know it, because he's being fed bad information. I mean, this is what is troubling to all of us, because we want a quick end to this. And again, we're going to be running out of fertilizer here we're going to have food shortages in this country and around the world here quickly. We're going to lose a lot of people. They're going to starve because of this war in Iran. And the downstream impacts of it have yet to be felt, other than the prices at the pump and a few other inconveniences. But come this time next year, John, I kid you not, if this is still going on, we will have serious food shortages. And I talked to farmers out in the Midwest this past spring about what was going on. And they said, absolutely, we're not buying fertilizer and we're not planting certain crops because we can't afford it. It's too expensive.
So you don't like the war in Iran?
I'm not a fan of it right now, and I haven't been from the beginning because I didn't see what the end game was going to be. We were told that the nuclear weapons were destroyed, and now we're back doing it again. It's that same story we've heard for 40
Netanyahu
years.
said that they were going to have a nuclear weapon in 30 days.
Exactly.
That was 10 years ago.
And we've heard that same narrative over and over.
We've heard it over and over again. So here's my paradigm on it.
Yeah.
Not that you asked. I invited you to be interviewed.
I know. No, I want to hear your
We're
paradigm.
just having a conversation, but I lived through the taking of our embassy in Tehran in 1978.
Yeah. Were you there?
No, but
Okay.
I'm just saying I was
remember
alive.
I remember it too.
You do?
Yeah.
You're too
444 days.
You're lying to me.
No, I remember. I was a young kid in school. I wrote poems about it.
Well, I was
grade
old
school.
enough to remember it pretty vividly, and it was agonizing for me. And so I felt like that we had provocation to go into Iran the day we got the hostages back, because it wasn't a group of students. It was a group of students with the encouragement and the empowerment of the Iranian government. The
Correct.
Shah of Iran was cheering them on every day. And Reagan should have gone in and bombed the hell out of them, but he couldn't do that because they were in large part responsible for his beating Jimmy Carter.
That's right.
Who was blamed for the embassy being taken in Tehran. But they have killed, since that time, they have killed thousands of our military men and women, either directly or indirectly through state-sponsored terrorism.
Right.
And I just feel like, and they've killed 43,000 of their own people this year who were activists against the government. I think any one of those things is provocation for us to go into Iran. It's painful. Nobody likes war. I fully supported President Trump going into Iran. I also did buy the story that it was going to be short-lived.
Right.
And throughout my life, I've learned that wars are very easy to start and very hard to end. And I think Trump is finding that out the hard way. I think he was probably sold a bill of goods by our intel agencies, and he thought it would be over and done with, like Venezuela was so neat and clean. And I've seen that repeated through history, both in those kinds of contexts, but also in business. I've seen people accomplish something that appeared so easy, and so they try to replicate it, but they didn't do the due diligence that they did on the first go, and it bit them on the butt on the second time around. So I don't know. I think they have got Trump over such a barrel right now.
I agree.
Because it's this pesky little thing called the midterms.
Yeah.
They know they've got him in a corner, and so they're playing hardball.
I think you're absolutely right on that assessment. The other side of the coin I see is we've been a unipolar world for so long that the American people have been the chattel to help fund the big stick that we've carried around the world. And we've got military bases all over the place. The Fifth Fleet is pretty much done. That's been bombed out of existence, and they've evacuated the people out of there. So our military presence in the Middle East is regressing rather rapidly. But if you look at the two other, world leaders, Xi and Putin is dealing with Ukraine, but the Ukraine situation is very similar to the Iran situation, and not because of Ukraine was part of the insurrection as well, or the Fedsurrection, but it's the central bank ruling, class, the international banking cabal that is, leveraging NATO and leveraging more us in this Ukraine war. And they've really milked us pretty darn well for this Ukraine war. Russia is just trying to protect their own Russians on the eastern side of Ukraine. They don't have any interest in taking Ukraine back. They don't want to do that, but they're not going to let their people be slaughtered either.
You don't think Putin's trying to put the former Soviet Union back together again?
No, I don't think so. But even if he was, I don't see Putin as necessarily, yes, are they a threat to us in the sense that they're nuclear power? Absolutely. Do I think they want nuclear war with us? No, because it's mutually assured destruction.
Nobody wants nuclear war
exactly.
with any
He's not stupid.
except maybe the supreme leader of Iran.
Which they're
because
insane.
He's crazy.
They're insane. You've got the IRGC and the supreme leader. You've got, the mullahs. They're all insane.
Yeah.
Are the Iranian people, by and large, good people? I think a lot of them are. I think a lot of them know what that was. They were around back into the 70s. They remember when the women didn't wear burqas. They remember when the women could dress in dresses and look Americanized, look westernized, or be comfortable, or whatever it was.
God,
They've lost their freedom and they see it. But I do think that I think that we're moving into a multipolar world. I think we're moving into real world assets, and BRICS nations are doing it quite nicely. There's companies out there like Abex Exchange, Abex Technologies that are actually setting up physical commodity exchanges where you can move inventory like liquid natural gas, gold, silver, copper, whatever, and get paid instantaneously. No more, T+5, it's T+0 with legal title to your asset. So you never lose things. It's not on the blockchain. It's all new proprietary technology. And they're set up in the BRICS nations. They're running it out of Singapore. And they are exploding right now because people want real world assets. They don't want financial instruments anymore. That's paper representation of something that you can never get the actual asset out of, like silver, like what we're seeing with the price of oil and so forth. The financial model is dead. People want the real thing. And I think a lot of that war we're seeing is coming out of Iran, because it is a juncture for north, south, east, west trade. And, Iran is part of BRICS. And so you're going to see Putin and Xi are going to support Iran to the best of their ability, Putin by staying out, Xi by providing weaponry. But I don't think they want to get entangled with us directly. But I think if we don't find a solution and an off ramp, it could escalate to something like that. How that happens, anybody's guess. But I think the best thing for America to do would be to get to real world assets, stop using fiat, whether it's crypto or it's dollar, get to where we are actually settling our debts with gold like the BRICS nations are, because you don't see BRICS at war with one another, because every trade debt they have is settled in gold. That's how it works. And that's what keeps the peace.
Fantastic. Ann Vandersteel, she is the host of Steel News. She is as smart as she is pretty. And she's also a good author. Tell us about your book.
CPS Pipeline, State-Sanctioned Kidnapping, forward by General Michael Flynn. Maureen Steele, myself, and Christopher Burns, our attorney, we're the board members of American Made Foundation, wrote this book with the expressed intent to educate parents on what happens when what CPS is, what happens when they engage in your life. We give you real world instances in this book, but then we also have a bonus chapter, how you can protect your children so that if CPS comes knocking, they cannot lay a claim to your children.
So where do we buy the book?
You can get it at AmericanMadeFoundation.org, or Barnes & Noble and Amazon have the book as well. I highly recommend it.
So is AmericanFoundation.org the best place to track you as well?
AmericanMadeFoundation.org. You can track me there, or at AnnVandersteel.com, my name. I have all of my social media links there and links to shows, etc.
Fantastic. Well, I've just met my new best friend. We've covered a lot.
We did.
But I got so much more to cover. What are we going to do, Ann?
That's okay. We'll be here tomorrow. I'd be my honor. Truly.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank
Yeah.
you, and have a good rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too.